What's going on, guys, and welcome to a video on Black Mirror. So I thought I'd switch things up a bit from the usual Doctor Who content. This is a Doctor Who, and always will be a Doctor Who focused channel. However, I do want to throw other things in there, other TV shows, movies, maybe even some music related stuff in there now and again. So I thought I've just finished watching series 1 through 4 of Black Mirror, all of Black Mirror that's currently available apart from Bandersnatch. That won't be in this list, but 19 episodes from series 1 to 4. I've watched them all now, so I thought I'd rank all of them from worst to best. Remember that this is my personal opinion. These are all opinions. I'd love to hear what your favorite episodes are, or even your whole ranking if you wanted to in the comments below, but this is purely my opinion. Anyway, let's get started. Coming in at number 19, we've got Metalhead. Now this episode is my least favorite, obviously it's at the bottom of the list. It follows 3 of these survivors who are surviving in this kind of post-apocalyptic world where these robot guard dogs, they used to be just, robot dogs that used to guard things, I guess. They've kind of turned evil, they've turned against the humans, and they're killing people just to kill them, I guess. Now these 3 people well, it turns out there are spoilers in this video, by the way. It turns out they're trying to get teddy bears from this warehouse to give to the survivors, presumably I'm guessing the kids, the children, the survivors of this whole apocalyptic thing. And they're trying to steal these teddy bears to give to them, but these guard dogs, they're all around, they're trying to kill people. They kill 2 of the people in the story, so then we just follow this one woman, her name's Bella. We follow her throughout the story. I just find that, it's in black and white, which I think is a little bit off-putting for me. I can kind of understand why they did it, but at the same time, I don't know, it's a bit off-putting. And just the whole story doesn't feel quite as intriguing and interesting as most other Black Mirror stories. It's still decent. I mean, there's not a Black Mirror episode that I think's downright really bad. It's just personally my least favorite. At number 18, I've got Men Against Fire. This is about a bunch of soldiers who are in a foreign country killing these mutated humans, which they call roaches. Now, it's worked out towards the end that they actually get these implants put into their heads, and what it does, it actually makes ordinary people look like these mutated roaches. So it turns out that, it's just the army or the military or whatever, they're just trying to kill off all these foreign people, and it's a pretty crazy thing. They make them look like these roaches and these horrible things just to, so that it doesn't look like they're actually killing people. I really thought this was quite interesting. It was a little bit kind of basic and kind of box standard, which is something that doesn't really happen with Black Mirror that often. Usually Black Mirror is way out there, or if it is something that's kind of, a bit similar to you, to something you've seen before, it at least kind of throws a bit of a twist on it. This story I just didn't feel really did that. It was an enjoying watch, but I don't know, there was something about it which just didn't quite hook me in. At number 17, I've got Nosedive. Now this one's basically about these eye implants, which is something that we actually see a lot throughout Black Mirror. Eye implants seem to be a really common thing. But with this one, basically you have your mobile phone, and whenever you have an interaction with someone, say you're going out and buying a coffee, or you're just doing anything, buying a ticket for something, just meeting someone on the street, bumping into someone somewhere, after you finish talking to each other, you basically rate each other from I think 1 to 5 stars, and you end up getting a rating. Now this one is about a woman called Lacey who is she wants to boost her rating up because the higher I think she wants to like upgrade her apartment or something, and she needs a higher rating to do that. So she's trying to get all these higher ratings, but she's trying to like hang around with higher rated people so that that can boost up her rating and stuff, but it ends up all going wrong. She basically ends up dipping down to like a 0.5 rating or something, completely terrible. She basically has a mental breakdown and goes crazy in the end. I think the whole idea of this story is really, really cool and a really interesting concept, on the fact that, just like your ratings, your social media ratings and presence can mean so much to some people, and it can go this far. I just feel like the main character in this one does annoy me quite a lot, just with the way she acts and the way she talks and everything. That's kind of the main thing that kind of makes me feel a bit iffy about this one and kind of annoys me a bit. At number 16, I've got Crocodile. Now, to be honest, this isn't really a bad episode, but for me, it felt pretty predictable. I think because by this point, I was really getting the ropes with how Black Mirror works as a show and how the twists worked, that with this episode I really saw a lot of the twists coming. Now it's about Mia and her boyfriend Rob. Basically they get involved in a hit and run, they hit a cyclist, kill him, and then they just dispose of the body and basically say, let's just make sure nobody says anything about this. Many years later, I think they're both very successful in their career, have a lot of money, and Rob decides that he's like, maybe we should, bring this out and tell people what happened. happened. She does not agree with this. She ends up killing him. And then even further down the track, well, actually not that long up, like straight after she kills him, she witnesses a hit and run outside of her house. And then, you know, there's this whole thing where this woman is doing an investigation, trying to figure out how this hit and run happened. And she uses this little device on people's heads to see what they saw. She figures out that, you know, Mia was one of the people that saw this incident. Goes to her to see what happened and finds out about her killing Rob and all that sort of stuff. I just felt like this one was very predictable. It was an interesting story, but just for me, I wasn't that enthralled with it because I just felt like it was so predictable. At number 15, I've got the Waldo Moment. This is a very political story, which really doesn't resonate with me too well because I'm not a very political person at all, but this does have its good moments about it. It's about a guy called Jamie who controls this kind of animated blue bear on a late night TV show, and he's really vulgar, he's really rude, but he's really funny as well, and you know, a lot of people can see that. He ends up, for some weird reason, basically putting himself up to be, as you know, to be elected for as, you know, president or prime minister or whatever it is, and ends up getting in a relationship with one of the female representatives. He then, you know, figures out some stuff and ends up basically completely exposing her publicly on live TV, and everything all goes downhill for him. But at the same time, you know, he's getting a hell of a lot of votes. Even though they were just doing this as a joke, he gets a hell of a lot of votes. Ends up being that he doesn't want to do this anymore, he's sick of this, he doesn't think it's right, but then kind of his, I don't know, producer or the guy who's above him ends up taking over his job, basically sacking him, and it's actually a really sad end. The main issue I have with this is, one, that it's very political, which is not really my sort of thing in the first place, but also Waldo sounds a hell of a lot like Grade A Under A, the YouTuber, and I really don't like Grade A Under A, so. At number 14, I've got Hated in the Nation. This is where we really start to get into the episodes that I do quite enjoy, and I mean, there is a hell of a lot more episodes that I really do enjoy than I don't really enjoy. Hated in the Nation is about these robot bees. Now basically, the bees start disappearing. I mean, this is a thing that actually kind of happened in real life a few years ago, and it's still, I think, happening to some extent today. Basically, bees just for some reason disappearing, they're just dying off, and in the future, in this story, they end up making these robotic bees which go around, pollinate plants, you know, keeping everyone alive. But it turns out that somebody has hacked these bees, and they're going and killing people based on kind of this this hashtag, this Twitter hashtag, death2. So basically, people tweet hashtag death2 and then a name, a Twitter, you know, name, and then after a certain amount of time, whoever's got the most votes for, the bees go and kill. It's a pretty brutal episode, and I think it is a really, really well paced and thought out episode. For me though, it did feel a bit long. It was one of the longer episodes, being the season, I believe, 3 finale. It did feel a little bit long, but it definitely was enjoyable. At number 13, I've got Archangel. Now this one is about a mother who has a daughter that she briefly goes missing. So she decides to get this Archangel system put into her daughter's head, which basically allows her to watch everything, see everything that her daughter's doing on basically an iPad. Also on this thing, you know, she gets alarms whenever, you know, her daughter's in danger or anything like that, an alarm goes off. And also, it actually like kind of changes their vision, so that if her daughter sees anything, you know, rude, you know, maybe dangerous, gory, or anything like that, it's just not nice to see, it blurs it so that they can't see it. So it's this really interesting system, and you know, she's doing it because she wants to make sure that her daughter's safe. It all goes a bit out of hand though when her daughter grows up. She ends up, you know, getting with someone, and it all goes a bit downhill from there. It gets pretty psychological, pretty crazy, and yeah, it's a pretty decent story. It's one that I wasn't massively engaged in, but it's still an enjoyable concept. Once again, the whole thing with being able to kind of see through computer system in the head, it's used quite a lot in Black Mirror, but yeah, I think this was a pretty decent one. At number 12, I've gone for Playtest. This is an interesting one. You've got an American guy, which is a bit different because, you know, Black Mirror, it's a British TV show, a lot of English and British actors and actresses. Whereas this one, you've got an American guy who is traveling around. I think he ends up in London, so we are back in Britain again. And he knows a lot about games. He's a video gamer. He gets with this person. You know, they become really good friends, maybe a little bit more than that. And she says, you should try out this thing. She finds it in the paper, something about testing a video game. game, this weird kind of new VR, more than VR video game. So he ends up doing it, and it ends up being this really creepy, just kind of crazy thing, which is what you expect from Black Mirror. He ends up going into this game and he has to have this thing put in his head to kind of get him into the world. Well, there's a really great twist towards the end, that, you know, he actually didn't really survive. He survived for like point something of a second after he put this thing in his head. It just basically shut him down and killed him there and then. But what we see throughout this episode is what was going on in his mind, and it's just a really interesting concept. It's kind of something that I feel like has kind of been maybe done before, something that you've maybe seen before, so it's not one of the most original ideas, but it is done pretty well. At number 11, we've got The Entire History of You. This one's interesting for this channel especially because Jodie Whittaker, the 13th Doctor from Doctor Who, is in it. So that's always an interesting thing, I suppose, when I'm a Doctor Who channel. And yeah, this is a pretty good one. This was kind of the first story that went for that, you know, you can kind of see things through your eyes and other people can see it, you know, you can, in this one, you can play it on a screen, you know, and show other people your memories, keep your memories kind of backlogged in your mind, and I think it is one of the better times they did it. Afterwards, it was kind of replaying very similar things, but this was the first time they really did it, and it was very good. This one was all about a guy named Liam and his wife. They had a baby, but then, you know, it ended up in the end realizing that Liam's wife actually cheated on him. The baby was almost certainly not his. It wasn't. I don't think it was 100% clarified, but it was pretty certain, you know, given the time frame and everything, that yeah, the baby wasn't actually his. And it was a very good story. I really did enjoy this one. Very emotional as well towards the end. At number 10, I've got Black Museum. Now, this is an interesting one. It's actually the final episode of Season 4, so the final episode in the seasons so far. And it's an interesting one. It's kind of got 3 stories or even 4 stories within one, like another episode which we'll get to later on. But yeah, it starts off with this guy and this girl going to this museum called the Black Museum. There's a guy there, he shows her around, and there's also a lot of Easter eggs to previous episodes, which I think is really cool in there. But then he starts going over specific things. First of all, he talks about this guy this doctor who they put this thing into his head so that he can experience the pain that people are feeling to help diagnose them better. But he ends up going a bit crazy from it, and he gets addicted to pain basically, and goes completely mental. The second one is about a guy whose wife went into a coma, and they managed to do this thing so that they put her consciousness basically in his head, and that also kind of drove him crazy and also her as well. And then the final one is kind of the final thing of the story, which sums it all up, which was this guy who supposedly killed someone, and they killed him with an electric chair, and then this guy ended up putting him as a hologram into this museum and making people kind of electrocute him. Even though he was dead, he kind of wasn't, so he felt it, but in a weird way. It's just a really interesting story. I do think another story, which we'll get to later, did the kind of, you know, multiple stories within one story better, but this is still very good. At number 19, I've gone for Shut Up and Dance. Now, this is honestly probably the most sick story, as in just disgusting, of any of the Black Mirror stories, and that's really saying something. It's about this guy. He's only 19 years old, and he gets this anti-malware virus thing on his computer to clean up his computer, and then pretty straight after masturbates to porn, and it turns out, well, this software isn't actually anti-malware. It kind of turns on his camera and records him. Now, he ends up kind of getting these messages and someone's telling him things to do. It ends up going really bad. He ends up, you know, having to rob a bank with this other guy who's also kind of, you know, being controlled by these people with the messages. And then there's eventually a fight to the death, which he wins. I don't really know how he won that fight, but because the guy was clearly a lot older than him, but I don't know how that worked. Whatever, it did. But then there's a revelation right at the end that he wasn't just, you know, watching porn. It was child porn, and it's just like, Jesus, that's just such a sick turn. I mean, this show's pretty sick at times, but that was just, and the look on his face, it's like, you've been rooting for this guy the whole time, thinking, yeah, he did that, but I mean, that's just a normal thing, whatever. But then when you realize what it actually was, the extent of it, you really think, I've been, you know, rooting for this guy the whole time, and it makes you feel like, Jesus, that was horrible. At number 8, I've got the National Anthem. This is the first ever episode of Black Mirror, and, well, definitely started the show off in an interesting way. It's about I think the Prime Minister or the President, Prime Minister wouldn't it be, of Britain, and basically there's some princess who's been captured, and she's reading this message off, and basically saying that the person that captured her wants the president to have sex with a pig live on TV, have it live on TV for everyone to watch. And yeah, then once he's done that, he'll let the princess free. It is such a sick, this is next to Shot of Medea. This is probably the next sick one. It's definitely the kind of, especially when you haven't seen the show before. This was actually the second episode I'd ever watched. I'd seen the entire the episode after this, 15 Million Merits. I had seen that previously at a friend's, but when I got into the show, this was the first one I started watching with, and I thought, wow, if this is what this show's like, then yeah, we're going to be on a bit of a wild journey. And yeah, it's an interesting episode, definitely, in the concept and what it's doing, but it is definitely very disgusting at times. At number 7, I've gone for Hang the DJ. This was an episode that I really wasn't expecting. Now, Black Mirror, you're usually expecting a bad ending. Disgusting, creepy, just a downright sad, emotional, just a bad ending. Black Mirror very rarely ends well in any way, but Hang the DJ, spoilers, it actually ends pretty well. It actually ends very well. Now, it's basically about this dating thing. You've got this thing, I think they call it, chief, or what is it? Coach. I think it's Coach. This little kind of circle computer thing, and they talk to it, and it basically matches them up. It's kind of like Tinder in a way. It matches you up with people, and then you kind of get to be with that person for a certain amount of time, whether it's a few hours, 5 or 6 hours, or whether it's like 3 years. And these two people meet right at the start. They seem to really get on together. They're a bit awkward, but they get on together, and then they kind of keep going through all these different other dates and end up realizing that they don't really like any of these other dates, and they do get back with each other again, get matched again. It all goes a bit all over the place, and you're kind of thinking, oh, this isn't going to end well, but it ends up ending really well. I just think it's such an uplifting episode of Black Mirror. It's really nice to have one of those now and again. At number 6, I've got USS Callister. This is the first episode of Season 4, Series 4, and it's a pretty interesting one. A very, very much more sci-fi episode, if I would say. But yeah, it's basically about this guy who's making this game. He's the founder of this game that he's making, and he has his own version, a modded version of this game at his house. And basically what he does, he gets people from his workplace, steals their DNA, whether he takes swabs off coffee cups and stuff like that, puts it into this machine, which then puts the people into his game. And the people in his game, they have memories. They know what happened, what was happening to them before they got put into the game. They're not the real people, but at the same time, they kind of are. And it's a really weird realization. Basically, he gets this new person. This new person starts working there. He gets her into the game. She's not having any of it. And it ends up just being a really exciting and just interesting story. It's got a very Star Trek vibe to it, with the way that, the costumes are. Just the whole layout of it's very Star Trek-y. And yeah, I think it's a really enjoyable episode. Once again, pretty creepy at times. You start this one off thinking, oh, this guy's a bit hard up, people at work, they treat him pretty badly, but then you realise, nah, he's actually a bit of a sicko. Number 5, I've got Be Right Back. This is about a husband and wife, maybe boyfriend or girlfriend, I'm not 100% sure. And the man ends up going out one night. I think he's just going to get some milk or something from the shop, something like that. He never comes home. It turns out he's been in like a car crash and he's died. And this is really sad. But then the woman finds out that she can get this thing where she can kind of get this computer system where her husband will text her on her phone. Basically, it takes things from like his internet, profiles like Facebook, Twitter and stuff, kind of figures out how he talks, what he's like, and makes it into a conversation. And it ends up escalating. It goes from just being text messages to being like a proper a phone call, to then turning into a thing where you basically put all that, everything about this person into this kind of dummy thing, and it turns into basically a real person. And it's really creepy in ways. It's also very strange just seeing how this works, but I mean, I think both the actors in this are great. They have great chemistry with each other, and it's just a really interesting and also very sad story. Another one that ends not necessarily badly, but not necessarily in a good way either. So yeah, really interesting story. And number 4, I've got White Bear. Now this was a really interesting, weird episode. It starts off with this woman. She's in this chair in a house, doesn't know where she is. She's just woken up. She has no idea what's going on. She ends up going outside, seeing that there's all these people around with like cameras focusing on her, and she's wondering what's going on. Then all of a sudden, these crazy people start coming after her, trying to attack her. She finds some other people, ends up going to safety with them. One of them ends up dying. She ends up going with the other one into this forest. Then she meets this other guy. Well, they go into the forest then after that. He kind of turns on them, tries to kill them. It all goes a bit crazy from there. And then there's this big realization at the end. We keep getting these little teasers as to this little girl. This little girl keeps showing up. We're wondering what's going on with this little girl. It ends up being that in the end, the woman who we are following here, who we are rooting for and feeling really bad for with what's happening to her here, it turns out that she actually brutally killed this little girl. And what this is, basically, this is her punishment. They're punishing her. They're wiping her memory every day and making her relive this thing every single day, this horrible, traumatic experience, because they don't feel like just shoving her in a cell or even just killing her is good enough for what she did. They think we're just going to torture her every single day, and it's the most brutal thing ever. It's quintessential Black Mirror, I suppose. So at number 3, we've got San Junipero. This is quite the roller coaster of emotions of a story. So this shy girl called Yorkie finds herself in a beach, in a bar, in a place called San Junipero. Now, this is 1987. She meets up with this girl and they end up sleeping together. And then she can't find this girl again. She just can't find her anywhere. And somebody says, oh, why don't you try looking for her in another time zone? And it turns out that this world that she's in, you can kind of go to different time zones. So she goes like the 1980s, the 1990s, and then finally finds this girl called Kelly in, I think it's 2002. And we find out that this whole world called San Junipero, basically when people die, they can have their consciousness uploaded to this virtual world, this system, and you can kind of live your afterlife. It's basically an afterlife in this world and this place called San Junipero. It's such a sweet story. It's another one that actually ends pretty well in a way. I mean, yeah, the characters die, but it does still end well in just, in a way, it does still end very well. It's just a very interesting story, a very emotional story, a love story which isn't used in Black Mirror that much, really. And I just think it's just a really uplifting story, especially by the end, but also very sad at times. In the runner-up spot at number 2, we've got 15 Million Merits. This was the first episode I ever saw. I watched it at a friend's house quite a few years ago, watched it, never really thought anything of it since, and then when I eventually did get Netflix, I started watching Black Mirror. Of course, this is episode 2, and yeah, it's a really another roller coaster of an episode. I mean, that's just kind of Black Mirror in a nutshell, a massive roller coaster. Starts out, you've got this guy who lives in this world where his bedroom is just a bed with a bunch of screens around it. He has to sit through these ads all the time, and to kind of turn off the ads, it costs him credits. He builds up credits, and everyone in this world builds up credits by cycling on these bikes. The more they cycle, the more credits they get to buy themselves food, yes, but then also mostly just to buy themselves these inanimate objects, these things on their screens that don't mean anything. But then he finds this girl, he ends up saying, you should do this competition. There's this competition you can do, but it costs a hell of a lot of money. He basically uses all his money to get her to do this show, and it ends up going all wrong. She was doing it to, become a famous singer or whatever, but she ends up kind of going into the porn industry, and it's like this whole big thing. He does a massive, amazing speech towards the end, and it's just this really interesting thing where, you can hate something so much that you rebel against it, but then given the opportunity of a better lifestyle, even though you hate what this all stands for, you're probably still going to take that, that better lifestyle over just, even though it isn't really something you agree with. At number 1, I've gone for White Christmas. Now, this is the other episode I was talking about when I was talking about Black Museum, where there's multiple things going on in the one story. I do think this one was done a lot better, though. I just found it more interesting and just more exciting. Maybe it's also because I saw this one first. It was broadcast first as well. Now, this is about these two guys. It's Christmas Day and they're in this house and they talk to each other. They start talking to each other about their past. Now, the first guy, he starts talking about, you know, how he was in this business where, well, first of all, he would be kind of watching someone on a screen, you know, someone would have like the implant in their eyes, he'd be watching them and kind of talking them through things. So this example that they showed was this guy who wanted to hook up with someone at like this party, and, you know, he could see, he was kind of going through what this guy should be doing. It all ended up going terribly wrong. And then this other thing was basically putting people's consciousnesses inside these almost like Amazon Echo looking things, like Google Home things, and yeah, basically people that did that went insane. Then it turns out this whole thing with the other guy, what it was to try and get a confession out of this guy to say what he'd done. So basically if we figure out that this other guy had a bit of a squabble with his wife, or girlfriend or whatever, pretty sure it was wife, and they blocked each other because this thing that they had, this system they had in their heads, you could block people and it would completely basically turn them, like you couldn't see them anymore, they were just like a blur. That happened, they had a fight, they separated, and then it turned out that his wife had a kid, but obviously he couldn't see the kid because this block thing also, you know, worked with descendants. Then eventually he found out that his then wife, his before wife, had died in a crash or something. That meant that the link was broken and he could see his kid again. He could see his kid for the first time. Turns out that the kid wasn't his. This whole squabble that they had ended up kind of being because of, you know, his wife cheated on him, and it was this really sad story. He ended up killing, I think, the kid's grandfather, and that's what the whole confession was about. It's a really well done story. I also love the way it ends, where it's just like him trapped in this thing, and, you know, it's just going out and out and out of this snowy globe thing, playing, you know, Christmas music. It was a horrific, terrible thing to sit through, but yeah, just a really well thought out episode, I thought. Alright, so there we have it. That's my ranking of all 19 current episodes from Series 1 to 4 of Black Mirror. This has been a rather long video, you know, 19 episodes to talk about, and there's more to talk about in these than I feel like there is when talking about Dog 2 episodes. There's just so much going on that, yeah, it's really hard. So this is probably quite a long video. I'm sorry about that, but I mean, hey, even now I've rushed through these a lot. I've been talking really fast, kind of trying to go off the top of my head and missing out a lot of stuff, I imagine, but yeah, it's kind of what I had to do. But anyway, that's it for this video, guys. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed, please go ahead, like and subscribe. Go and follow me on Twitter, link is in the description below, and I'll see you guys in the next video.